Hey there, everyone. It is nice to see you. I'm Amy, also known as the Ish Girl, and I am so excited that you came back for week 2 of the training that I have for you. So if you were with me last week, you know that I had a workbook for you that hopefully you've downloaded by now because there are going to be some things that we fill out in it for this week as well. And so I hope that you have that. If you don't have it, you can go to theishgirl.com/free training, and I'll have that link up here in a second, and you can grab that and get that going. All right, this week we're going to continue our training, and let me get us started with the slideshow. I'm going to share my screen here. Let's see. Okay, that's kind of weird. All right, here we go. All right, so last week we talked about developmentally appropriate behavior in teens. And the question that we were addressing is, why did he do that? And this week, what we're talking about is, what was she thinking? And if you're following along, that's going to be developmentally appropriate thought patterns. So how teens think based on their development and where their brains are in this whole process of adolescence. So that is what we're focusing on today. But before we get rolling, just like last week, I want to make sure you guys are all set. And here's that link that I was talking about if you want to go and get the free training workbook. It looks just like that on the screen right here. And if you download that, you can follow along with me and take notes. I don't know about you, but I am such a kinesthetic learner and a visual learner that it really helps me to have a place to take notes or doodle or do whatever. So thank you so much for taking your time today and taking it for yourself to do something that will help you and enrich your life. So I'm just inviting you in tonight to pour your favorite drink, shut your door, turn off your phone, grab that workbook, find something to write with, and sit back and relax. I really want to have some fun with you guys. Okay, so last week we talked about some of the common problems that as parents or teachers of teenagers we might feel. And specifically when I think about this, for me, I'm thinking about that middle school aged teenager. You may have older teens, and I think it's still, this still applies because as we talked about last week, there's that 10-year time period of growth and development that we go through as adolescents, and people go through it at different rates, right? Because everyone's different. So some of the things you might be feeling are things like frustration, mystification, like you're just so perplexed and you do not understand what is going on, why your teen is acting the way they're acting, the things they're saying, the choices that they're making might really just perplex you. And you also might be in a place where you are just super resigned, like you don't know how anything's going to get better. You feel a little bit hopeless, just kind of like you have to wait this thing out, whether you're a teacher waiting for the end of the year, or if you are a parent and you're just kind of waiting for your kids to get to the next stage, you know. So those are some of the common problems that we might be feeling. And my question for you is, do you relate to that? And if you do, I would love for you in the comments to just do that little emoji with the raised hand, or just say, yes, I totally relate. I'm curious to know how many of you are feeling either resigned, frustrated, mystified, any of those things, because what I really want you to know, and hopefully you already do, but I just want to reassure you that it's not your fault you're feeling that way, and you're not alone, right? Because teaching and raising kids is so full of uncertainty and challenge and struggles. So just know that you are completely amongst kindred spirits, I would say, if you are feeling that way with your teens. But what I want to do for you today is help you and empower you with knowledge and some strategies so that you know why your teens act the way they do, so that you can stay calm and engaged thoughtfully, knowing exactly how to respond instead of reacting, so that you can build trust in your classrooms and in your homes, so that you can connect meaningfully with the kids in your life. Because when you can connect meaningfully, that's where the magic happens, I feel like. When you're connected, that opens the door for you to be able to influence and guide and coach and teach the teens in your life, okay? So that's my goal here. And how do I know I can do this? And I would say absolutely because of my own journey. This is something that I shared and talked about a little bit last week. I'm probably going to hit on it every week just for my newcomers out there. But I want you to hear about my story for a couple of reasons. Because number one, the number one thing to keep in mind is there's not a magic pill for teaching or parenting, right? It's all a messy jumble of trial and error. And it's really normal to get discouraged and frustrated. And what I want to do here is teach you a different framework for looking at your teens and even for looking at yourself. There's a reason that I call myself the Ish Girl. And if you're not familiar with that yet, what I'd like to share with you is it's my little name that says, one who has humorous grace with herself when discovering she's messed up or flaked out again. And I feel like that is who I am. I am constantly messing up or flaking out, but I'm also constantly showing up. And that's the part that counts, right? Showing up no matter how messy it is. So, but the other piece to this is this journey is not about me. It's about you and you making breakthroughs with your teens and your relationship with them so that, through having a better understanding, you can have that connection like we talked about. So, okay. So just to kind of give you a brief rundown, again, if you've seen video 1, thank you for hanging in with me as I go through this again. But I used to really feel frustrated with my teens and with myself, and I would react instead of responding. I felt like there was something wrong with me. Like, why can I not be a better mom? Why can I not have more self-control? Sometimes I felt like there was stuff wrong with my teens or with my students, like what in the world has gotten into them, or why are they not acting the way that I expect them to, the way that I talk to them about. And then I would say too, I was a little bit hopeless. Like, how can I make anything better? It doesn't seem like I'm getting any traction one way or another. So, and then the biggest thing I think is that as I laid out those expectations and we walked through life together, either as a teacher with my middle school kids or with my own teens, is getting frustrated because they weren't behaving like little adults, right? Like they know what to do it. Not that we as adults always do that, but I think I was subconsciously viewing my teens as little adults, and they are not that. And that's what video 1 is all about. So if you haven't seen that, I would encourage you to go back and watch video 1 so that you can kind of get that nailed down. And I'm curious if you guys have ever felt that way too. Like, have you been frustrated and just felt like you were missing the mark all the time? For me, my turning points, there were a couple in teaching. I realized that the strategies that I was using didn't work. I was yelling a lot, and I would end the day with a hoarse voice, like a laryngitis almost. And so I had to figure out a different way to do things. And plus, it wasn't who I wanted to be. I did not want to be that yelling teacher. Plus, it wasn't working. And then the other story that I shared last week, and you can, again, go back and listen to it, is after my daughter and I watched the Netflix show 13 Reasons Why together, that was a big wake-up call that I needed to find some ways to connect so that we could talk about really serious things. And also, I wanted to find ways to make sure I knew about the content and things that she was digesting, basically, so that I could use those and leverage those as opportunities to connect with her. So my process in both situations was to really resource up and invest in myself as far as learning new things, investigating, and kind of looking at different trainings and just trying to amass all kinds of information and read articles and books, and whether they were nonfiction, kind of self-help parenting type books, or even young adult fiction, which really does give you some insight into the teenage mind. Anyway, through all of that, I really gained a lot more confidence, a lot more clarity, and I was able to have a lot more calm, which is what I want for you guys. I feel like what I have done is I've taken all that in and I've digested it, and now I'm sharing how I've processed it with you guys so that you don't have to take the field trip like I did. You can just have the in-class lesson, right? Okay, so those actions that I took, they really started to open my eyes to how complex teens really are. And it also, that new knowledge led to more opportunities for connection with my teens. Those opportunities just popped up all over the place once I had the eyes and the framework to see things with. So that's why everything changed. I had that new framework for understanding my teens, but as part of that framework, and this is not something I focused on last week, this is for this week, one of the big things that has truly helped me in connecting with my teens, both as a teacher and as a parent, is recognizing that I am not a victim. And I think I often don't realize when I slip into that mentality that things are happening to me, and that I have no control over it. But it's easy to find yourself in that place when you feel like you're constantly attacked or you're constantly having to have your guard up. It's easy to get to a place where you're feeling beaten down and you do feel like a victim. I think that's totally natural, but I think being aware of it and knowing how to combat it is super important. So I did want to go through, sorry about that. Okay. I want you to imagine feeling confident in how you're showing up for your teens. I want you to imagine feeling having a calm response to any interaction that you have with them. And I also want you to imagine having a compassion for your teens and for yourself. That part's super important, instead of shaming or blaming yourself or your teens. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So I want to show you how you can do all those things, having that confidence, that calm, and that compassion, simply by reframing how you look at your teens, but also reframing how you look at yourself a little bit, okay? So the first thing you need to know is that you're not a victim as long as you have a choice. Now, your choices may not be fun choices or things that you know, it might be like the lesser of two evils kind of feeling, but as long as you have a choice, you're not a victim. And also, and this is what I did my last podcast on, I think it's episode 67 of In the Middle of It, which is life happens for you and not to you. And if you can frame the things, the events that happen in your life with just that one phrase, that will change everything for you. So if you look at things as being for your benefit in some way or having a lesson or a purpose, that really helps to stay out of that realm of feeling like you're a victim, right? Okay. And then here's a big one. All right. If the things that we're going through, and I'm sharing, and you'll see if you've downloaded the workbook, I'm sharing a lot of things in a spreadsheet format, and it's things that are developmentally appropriate for teens. And in the middle column is what our knee-jerk reaction might be to when teens act that way. And then the last column is a better way that you might respond. But here's my question for you. If you're reading the things that are developmentally appropriate and it's characteristic of you to act that way as well, that is a red flag. Now, I'm the first to say there are lots of things on this list of what's developmentally appropriate where I'm like, oh, yeah, I struggle with that still. Yep, I'm still developing in that area. I think that that's natural, but if you're living there all the time and you haven't until this moment recognized like, wow, that's not how I want to show up as the adult that I am, then that's a red flag. And I would say you really want to reflect on that and journal about that, maybe talk to some of your closest friends or colleagues and just kind of explore that a little bit and what that means. Okay. Also, and this ties right back into what I just said, we have to show up as the grown-up, either as the parent or as the teacher. Like, we are the adults in the situation. And so we have to show up in a different way than our teens are showing up. So hold on to that. And here's the big point. Teens may push against us. And I'm just going to take the may out, because our teens are going to push against us in some form or fashion. Depending on their temperament, their age, their personality, where they are in their development, it's going to happen. It's developmentally appropriate for them to push against our rules, for them to push against our personalities, even for them to push back against the things that we want them to do, the things that we don't want them to do, all the things. But our job is to be as consistent as we can humanly be, and also to just stand firm on the boundaries that we created for our teens, and to stay consistent, right? And to stay immovable as far as how we treat them and how we feel about them. So in fact, this week, my podcast episode is going to be all about the fact that the way you want to show up for your teens is with this thought in mind, that there's nothing that they can do or say that will make you love them any more or any less. You're just unconditionally loving them and showing up for them. So, okay, that was a little bit of a soapbox. I didn't know I was going to say that. So let's move on to the next thing. So being the grown-up is when we step into our authority over and our responsibility for all the things. So we have authority over the things that are kind of under our umbrella, our words, our actions, and I'm getting ahead of myself. So those are our emotions, our actions, our words, our triggers, our responses. Those are things that we have control over. And being the grown-up is when we own that, we have authority over ourselves in that, and we take responsibility for our emotions, our actions, our words, our triggers, our responses, anything that you can think of. Now, not someone else's emotions, actions, words, triggers, responses, just our own, right? So if you can show up and take that kind of responsibility, then you are showing up as the grown-up, which I thought I looked at several definitions of what it means to be a grown-up. Not childish or immature, emotionally independent, behaves in a responsible, mature way. So I thought that was super interesting, just something to think about. So last week, the first secret that we talked about was developmentally appropriate behavior. Why did he do that? This week, we're going to talk about what was she thinking? Developmentally appropriate thought patterns, right? So let's get started with that. So it is developmentally appropriate with thought patterns for teens to not be aware or able to voice what they think, feel, or want at times. It's kind of like their emotions may feel like a tangled ball or a stew, and they cannot articulate that, which can be really frustrating, right? As a teacher or a parent. This might be a time when you maybe want to demand answers from them, or tell them, like, here's what you're thinking or feeling or wanting, or you might tell them what they should think, feel, or want. You might completely invalidate what they are able to share, right? I can remember it's easy when my kids are kind of distressed but can't talk about it, or they can talk about it. It's easy for me to want to say something along the lines of, don't feel that way. And I have to stop myself, because you feel how you feel. How you react to how you feel is where you have some control over that. But your feelings are your feelings. And so telling them something along the lines of, don't feel that way, that's super invalidating. Or saying something along the lines of, well, you're just 13, of course you feel that way, or of course you can't, of course you're upset about that, like just kind of blowing it off because of their age. That's super invalidating. And I guess that's the next thing I want to share is, what does invalidating mean exactly? And I thought it would be a good time to kind of take a break and just talk about that. Invalidating something is to render it invalid, to discredit it, or nullify it. So think about your conversations with your teens. Are there any points where you feel tempted to, or actually step into discrediting what they're saying, or nullifying it, or just kind of blowing it off? That would be invalidating. But instead of doing that, what we want to do is to validate our teens. And that looks like, affirming them, authenticating something, verifying and confirming. So that looks more along the lines of something like, I see that you're upset. I see that you're having a hard time communicating. I love you, or I want you to know I'm here for you when you're ready to talk. Or I'm so sorry that you're this upset, or something along those lines where you're just stating, you're not approving. So validating is not approving of something necessarily. It's just stating that you are affirming that you know how someone's feeling, that you see them. So that's validation. Okay. So when you are experiencing a teen in this way, one of the most helpful things that you can do, and it's not necessarily helpful in that moment, but I think by practicing this, it will help you in the moment eventually. And that is to learn to recognize and define the emotions that you're feeling in any given moment that you're experiencing, right? Because when you're aware of what those emotions are and what you're feeling, it makes it easier to not project that onto your students. So if you can stand in your space of, I'm really ticked off right now, or I'm really sad right now, or I'm really grieving right now, then it helps you give your students and your kids the freedom to feel what they're feeling and be okay with that, right? You don't have to solve what they're feeling. I think just having somebody come alongside you and see you is really powerful. Okay, it is also developmentally appropriate for teens to lack the ability to connect their current actions to possible future outcomes or consequences. All right. So I think we've probably all seen examples of this, and it's really easy in the moment to admonish your teens for a lack of awareness after the fact, when they might be experiencing the consequences, right? Or even identify their behavior as a character flaw, like they're just so, and I don't want to say stupid or dumb, because I don't think as parents or teachers, I hope we certainly don't want to characterize our students like that, but I think careless, thoughtless, those kinds of things. So identifying it as a character flaw versus a behavior in the moment. So an example of that would be like asking, what did you think would happen when you did that? Like that kind of frustrated question. And what comes to mind, I have a friend who lives in the neighborhood, and she has a pool, and she has a teenage son and a teenage daughter. And her son, I believe, is actually in college now, but when he was a younger teen, they had a pool in their backyard, and they had an like a covered porch. And she came outside where he was with a bunch of his friends, and they had started climbing up onto that roof of the porch and taking a running leap to jump into the pool. Like, oh my gosh, like even thinking about it right now just gives me the shakes, because of all the horrible things that we know as moms and dads, as teachers, as what could happen in that moment of, somebody could have broken something, or, their necks, their arms, their legs, all the things. Like we know what the possible outcomes would be. So in that situation, clearly they had words about that. And for the life of me, I don't know that I could stay calm in that situation, because that's kind of a freak out situation. But I do know that if one of those kids, if her son had broken his arm as he ran off the roof to jump into the pool, it's not helpful to say in the moment, like, what were you thinking? Didn't you know that something like this would happen? That's not helpful. And characterizing them like, that was so careless, that was so thoughtless, like what were you thinking? Not helpful. What would be helpful is, number one, setting boundaries and using open-ended connection questions, open-ended questions to connect today's actions to tomorrow's consequences, right? So after she found them doing that, saying, asking questions with a different tone than, what did you think you were doing? But help me understand what you thought might, what were you thinking would happen if you did this? Did you think about, what are the possibilities about what could happen? We as moms, dads, teachers could list out, like, you could have broken this, one of your friends could have, died, like all the things. We could list those out, but maybe having your team list them out and say, let's think about what are some of the outcomes that might have happened if you continue to do this. So really using those open-ended questions. And just a reminder, open-ended questions are ones that cannot be answered with yes, no, or fine, which I know I think those are my teens' 3 favorite words. But really asking questions to draw out a more thoughtful answer from them. And here's the thing, even when you ask open-ended questions, they may not be able to answer it, but because of the way our brains work, this is something that I know. It burrows into your head and their brain goes to work trying to answer it. So even if they never verbalize it to you, their brains are working on an answer. So asking something like, what would be your plan if something happened to one of your friends as you're doing this? Like, how would you handle that? If your friends were the ones who asked you if they could run off your roof and get into the pool, what are some ways that you could have said no? Let's practice that. So really open-ended questions are a skill and a really powerful way to communicate with your teens. Okay, the next thing that it's developmentally appropriate for teens to do is to withdraw from challenges and avoid potential failure. So what I think is interesting here, and I want you to note, is if you look at these 3 things, not being aware or able to voice what they think, lacking the ability to connect their current actions, and then withdrawing from challenges and potential failure, sometimes it seems like one is up here and one is down here. They're kind of the opposite of one another. But I think that's how our teens are, right? Like, they're up one day and down the next. They're bold and rash on one day and introverted maybe or reticent the next day. So what I'm talking about with withdrawing from challenges and avoiding potential failures, I think that with that, it's really easy to blame your teens for withdrawing or failing after the fact, spelling out possible consequences for withdrawing or failing in the moment. So for me, my son in middle school, where we live, at the end of 5th grade, they go to the middle school, or they're invited to go to the middle school to do a Meet the Instrument night. And the band program at the middle school that my kids went to is tremendous. Like, there's an amazing band director. He loves the kids. The program is huge. It's just an incredible, incredible elective. Well, I really wanted him to give it a try, and he refused to do it. And I think thinking back to that in the moment, a lot of what I used to try to persuade him to try was spelling out the consequences. Like, you'll be separated from the friends that you've made because they'll be really tight with their band friends, or you're going to miss out on field trips, or you're going to, all the things. But instead, it might be more helpful. And this is a little bit more about on the failure side than it is about the trying things and withdrawing from challenges. But I think it goes hand in hand, because when you can normalize failures and setbacks and say things like, it may not work out, but that's okay. And when you can focus on the process and really, especially as teachers, those teachers of you that I'm talking to out there, if you can help them learn the skills they need to try a new endeavor and focus on that rather than the outcome, and then also empathize with any unintended consequences without recognizing them. So, okay, I would say the way that this is most effective is really to share your own current challenges and areas where maybe you're having setbacks, your failures, your mistakes. And I'm not talking about, and I know Brene Brown has a word for it. I can't think of it off the top of my head, but it's like gold-plated scars or something along those lines, where you're talking about something that's happened in the past and said, you know, here's this horrible thing, this horrible failure that I had, but here's how I responded and here's what happened. And now everything is wonderful, right? Well, that's great, but what is it like in the middle of it? What is it like as you're going through the process of figuring something out and it's not working and you're having to go back and try again and figure things out and really work at it and struggle and grapple with it? So I would say sharing that process and emphasizing the process of things and walking through things and how you just keep going and you keep showing up. And I know this word is really cliche right now, it's everywhere, but just your resiliency in the face of things, modeling that, and then also being open with your teens about it and walking them through your process with them is so powerful, right? So I think this is a good spot for open-ended questions. And so I think asking something along the lines of, what is your plan to try again, or to figure out the solution, or to move on to the next thing now that this is over and it didn't go the way that you wanted to? So what is your plan for what's next? And helping them think through that and process what that's going to look like. So those are the 3 developmentally appropriate things that we are covering for this week. I would love to hear any questions that you have if you want to put them in the comments. Also, if you are finding this Facebook Live at a later time, I just want to encourage you to head to theishgirl.com/free training and grab the workbook that goes along with it. And I just want you to know that this is a 5-part series. So the next one, if I can move my slide here, is going to be next week. Let me move this out of the way. On Tuesday, February 25th at 6 p.m. Central Time. And we are going to talk about secret number 3, which is, who do they think they are? Developmentally appropriate identity growth. And that is going to be the things that teens go through as they develop their own identities. So I hope that you can join me then. As always, I have just enjoyed this so much, whether you watched it live or you caught me at a later time. I hope it's been beneficial. Just shoot me a DM if you have anything that you'd like to share, or you can leave a comment underneath here, and I will definitely get back to you. So again, I'm Amy, the Ish Girl, and I'm so glad to have had this time with you, and I'm so glad to be in the middle of it with all of you. Be sure to check out my podcast. They drop on Fridays. And again, it's In the Middle of It with Amy Kelly. All right, thanks.